Hello and welcome to Culture Vibes, the Federal's special program in which we talk to writers and artists about their work. In Narendra Modi's India, the position of the 200 million Muslims has been under intense scrutiny. Though Muslims were promised equality under the Indian constitution, the community today stares at growing and systemic marginalization as the secular fabric of India phrase. To discuss the minority question, joining me today is Professor Mujibur Rehman, who teaches at Jamia Millia Islamia and has written a very interesting book on the issue. It's called Shikwa-e-Hind, the Political Future of Indian Muslims. This is the cover of the book. It has been published by Simon and Schuster. The new book critically examines the current political challenges facing Indian Muslims and also explores how they can reclaim their democratic rights and secure their political future in a nation that's increasingly dominated by the Hindu rights, majoritarian agenda, and policies. Professor Rahman, welcome to the show. Thank you for making time for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction.
You mentioned that how this, the rise of the Hindu rights since the 80s, and more acutely since the BJP's coming to power in 2014. You describe this period as third political moment, and write briefly that the first political moment happened when in 1857 revolution, and the second was followed at the time of partition in 1947. How would you describe this phase, sir, and why do you think it's particularly challenging for Muslims today?
Well, there is a perception that India was under Muslim rule, and so entire discussion is concerning Muslims as citizens and their rights, and so one has to start because Muslim identity, even if it is conventionally debated as a minority rights and minority identity, and it is a religious minority in modern India, but the fact remains that it is a historically, as I describe in the book, a very, very dense identity, or it's a densely historical identity. So it's not like Indian diaspora in America with no history, or Muhajirs in Pakistan who have no history, or Bangladesh refugees in India, for instance, who have a very different kind of history. So it's a community which has a long, long history, and there are different interpretations of those historical associations and historical dimensions of the identities about it. So therefore, it is important to look back and see what has happened to the Muslim community in a historical sense, the sort of directions that the community's politics and history has taken, and how that has impacted. It is in this context I try to take a long-term historical view and describe it for the convenience of clarity, conceptual clarity. Now, what do I mean by political moment? Political moment is quite an important concept in political theory. It is a moment in which a community, how a community deals with its political future. And I'll come down to those. That's the key notion called the political future. So in 1857, for the first time, the community began to realize that, it has lost its own power. Like people of Muslim religion will not be in a position of power, and they would be treated as subjects because they would become colonial subjects. So that's where the realization came. And out of that, various responses came. There was response from Deoband side, how the religious life will be organized. And there was a response from Aligarh, what sort of education they should take and to compete and modernize themselves to live in a new world. And then in 1947, despite partition, Indian Muslims were given the equal rights. They were given the freedom to live with dignity and rights. And it was promised to them by particularly secular political parties and secular leaderships led by Gandhi, Nehru, and others, that they would get better rights than what they were promised in Muslim country, newly created Muslim country called Pakistan. So they will be treated equally in all respect, in all walks of life and in all areas of their life, and that is how the constitution came into existence, and that is what is the framework in which Muslim community accepts its citizenship. And until now, we have come across that is reasonably respected, even if there were issues as it became quite apparent, particularly with respect to economic backwardness. It became quite manifest during such a report and all. And that backwardness could be treated as minority rights violations, because as minorities, they should have been treated a little better than what they were done, how they were treated until then. About it. Now, the present moment, I call it a third political moment because there is a deliberate attempt to squeeze their political voice. As you know, that Bharatiya Janata Party, for instance, does not field Muslim candidates. The only candidate it fielded in the last elections, out of 303 candidates it fielded, was from Kerala, who perhaps they knew it quite well was not going to win. And today we have a cabinet which does not have a single Muslim face. It's a strong community of 200 million, which is population is more than the population of France and Germany put together. And now our prime minister says that we would need a secular civil code, but the fact is that we don't have a secular cabinet. A cabinet that does not have a single face from its largest majority is not a secular cabinet. And that is what I call the political moment. So there is clearly some sort of an unsettling that has happened, where Muslims are made to realize that they are not equal. And so there is a growing feeling in the Muslim community that they are confronting a situation where not one but two laws are evolving. There is one law for non-Muslims and there is a law for Muslims. For instance, I can give you an example. There was a case concerning an alleged rapist who happens to be a Muslim in Ajodhya, and where his house is bulldozed. Whereas in case of Bilkis Bano, the rapists were garlanded. When they were convicted rapists, they were released and they were garlanded, and the matter had to go to Supreme Court to be reversed again. So this is just one example, and there is a widespread feeling among Muslim community, among secularists, that things are going in wrong direction so far as Muslims are concerned. They are not being
Right.
treated as equal. Yeah,
So, would you
I hope
say
that.
that while Muslims have been marginalized over the years since independence, this regime has been particularly pernicious and vindictive in some sense?
No, this regime is not pernicious or vindictive. This is, India is in the middle of an ideological warfare. So this is part of an ideology.
Mm.
Because Hindu majoritarian ideology does not consider minority rights as a distinct set of rights. Any majoritarian ideology, religious majoritarianism of any kind, whether Muslim or Hindu kind, in Pakistan, it's the same story. The religious majoritarianism do not look at minority rights as a distinct set of rights. So in that
Right.
sense, it is very much consistent with the conventional majoritarian ideology. So they don't look at minority rights as a distinct set of rights. They look at minority rights as divisive. That's why
Mm.
they always kind of get upset when you talk in terms of minorities. Because in India, the other problem is that because Muslims are a visible and a significant political face in the society, so and with such long history, so the most beautiful thing of India called Taj Mahal is associated with Muslims, and so there are a lot of other things which have been associated with Muslims. So, so the Hindu majoritarian ideology somehow other feels deeply uncomfortable with it, and so they are quite upset, and so as a result of which the whole political discourse of the last 70 years, Muslim assertion or Muslim struggle or Muslim justification of Muslim question or Muslim issues as minority rights has kind of generated a kind of a color in the political discourse, where the moment you talk about Muslims, minority people think it is Muslims. So the two word has collapsed.
Mm.
And so you don't have to, in India, you don't have to mention Muslims when you say, the moment you say it's minority, people will assume it is Muslim, So if there is a report of a, let's say, minor ethnic scuffle taking place in some small town between a majority community and minority community reported in the media, the moment it's written minority community, people will assume it must be Muslim. They'll not assume it is Sikh, or they'll not assume it is a Jain or it is a Christian about it. They'll say, oh, it must be a Muslim guy about it.
Mm.
That's how the discourse has evolved in our political domain, though that should not have been, because India has so many other minorities, and but it is the Muslim. So so Hindu majoritarianism looks at Muslims as asking for minority rights as something which is a very, very unwarranted privilege. and which they don't want to give it to them. So they have all these terms long before Narendra Modi appeared in the political scene, long before 2014. They had all these terms called Tuštikaran, appeasement, vote bank
Yes.
politics. Anything about Muslims is a Tuštikaran.
Mhm.
Or a vote bank politics. Sachar report, which was basically an official report, was evaluating Muslim conditions, was also presented as an act of appeasement, as an act of vote bank politics.
Right.
So there is a deep-seated ideological understanding which says that Muslims do not really deserve equal status in society. One among them is that for thousands of years they have ruled this country, and during their rule, they have done a lot of bad things. They have destroyed temples, and their cultures are different, and they kill cows which we worship, and all of that about of it. And then there is the other side of the argument. They said, "Oh, we Hindus are always generous. That is the reason why these people have been living in this country, and we are very nice and good people. And so why should we give them any special considerations? Why
Right.
do they need some separate minority rights?"
One interesting aspect about your, when you're talking about majoritarianism and Hindu majoritarianism is the caste element of it. That you say that there are limitations of the Hindu-Muslim framework, and we should look at it that the people who are in power are also in some sense minority because they belong to a certain caste. And in the
Right.
case of the Hindu majority, it's the Brahmins or the most upper caste of Hindus. So how would you look at that? And that is also playing out differently in India today. How would you describe that?
Yeah, it's very important to understand Hindu society. You have to understand, because Hindu society, eventually, the DNA is the caste system or the caste order. You have to understand that. Without that, you can't understand Hindu society. Now, the question is that when one begins to analyze it, because this whole thing has always been presented as Hindu-Muslim story and Hindu-Muslim conflict. But when one looks at it, then one begins to ask the question: why is it that all these issues have become so sharp and so prominent in last 30, 40 years? Why it was not there? If it is a Hindu-Muslim story, then it should have maintained the similar momentum all along. Why do we see that things were a little different before 1980s? Between 1940 to 1980s, the things were a little different, and now why things are so different about it? So then you'll come across that there has been a fundamental change in the power equations so far as the Hindu right ideology is concerned, because Hindu right ideology. So that's why I say about a bit what is unfolding in India in last 10 plus years. If you wanted to understand this, you have to go back to 100 years of to 1920s, and you look at the political landscape. When you look at the political landscape of 1920s, what do you see? You basically see three base three major ideological forces, political forces, who had a unified objective. They wanted to kick the Britishers out. There were secularists like Congress and the communists, and then there was Muslim separatists who wanted a separate country for Muslims, and then there were Hindu rights who were interested to build up a Hindu land or a Hindu society out of it. So, but their goal was one. The first primary goal was that to basically to kick the Britishers out, but each of them had a separate ideological vision. uh, what kind of India would eventually emerge, or what would happen once Britishers depart. So there, each of them had their own ideology. So Hindu right had a different ideologies. Though in the 1947, the first two groups, the secularists and the Muslim separatists, were able to fulfill fairly good part of their project. Hindu right was a marginalized force at that point of time. But in last 70 years, the Hindu right has been able to organize itself and has been able to outmaneuver the secularists and their framework of secular constitution, and outsmarted them, has emerged as a hegemonic political force. So this is an ideological force, and it had a clear understanding of it, where Muslims stand. That's why when Prime Minister first gave his speech in the Parliament of India after 2014, Narendra Modi, he talked about 1,000 years of slavery. In a recent visit to United States Congress, in his speech, he said about that India was under foreign rule somehow for thousands of years, which includes Muslim rule. So Muslims are also seen by Hindu right as people who were associated with some kind of a colonial rule, and they are part of some kind of a colonial project. So, which was not the part of the narrative of the secular nationalism which Nehru and Gandhi championed. For Nehru and Gandhi's, the colonialism started and stopped with the British, and not
mm,
before that, because a large number of Muslims who came back, unlike Britishers who went back, here everybody stayed back and they owned this country, and for thousands of years. And it is quite ironical when you look at it at this point of time.
mhm,
We have a person of Hindu heritage by name Rishi Sunak, who until recently was the Prime Minister of Britain. We have a person of Tamilian descent of Hindu or ancestry called Kamala Harris, is expected to become the President of America. And
mm,
while we have all these things happening in this country, here, Muslim community, which has been living here for thousands of years, and many of
mm,
them were probably Hindus in the past who have embraced Islam for a variety of reasons at different points of time. Here is a
mm.
political party which does not even give them a ticket to run for parliament,
Right.
and they don't have
But
a
the Hindu
place in the
right would
cabinet.
come and counter. The Hindu right would counter this with the situation of minorities in, say, Pakistan or in Bangladesh, where they would say that there has been constant, attack on them, and relatively Indian Muslims are safer, and they should be more grateful rather than be complaining. How would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, so far as the minority situation in Pakistan, in Bangladesh is concerned, this is true, unfortunately, that the minority situation in those countries are not good. So minorities have been facing persecution, not just religious minorities, but also Muslim minorities, say Ahmadiyas, are also facing a lot
Yes.
of persecutions. And there are also ideological, because they are not adequately democratic societies, because both the countries have gone through dictatorships, and there are tremendous amount of political persecutions. The political persecutions in those countries are also very, very high compared to India. In India, we do have political differences, and there are political opponents who have been thrown in prison during emergency time. At this point of time, there are many who are thrown in prisons as well. But
Right.
still, in case of Pakistan, in case of Bangladesh, is much more higher case. So if you look at Imran Khan, and then you have a prime minister who has hanged Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and all the stories are there about it. Now the
Right.
question is this: at the time of partition, there was no bargain, to use Indian Muslims as a bargaining chip. Things were wrong over
Yeah.
there, so therefore they have to be treated. That is not how the constitution was framed, and that was not what was the deal that was signed in the India Independence Act. The question is this: there are minority situations which are bad in many parts of the world. There are also minority situations which are good in many parts of the world.
Right.
So it's a choice that you have to make, whether you want to say Indian diaspora, which lives in America, their conditions are extremely good. They are not
Mm,
facing any discriminations. Their temples are not raised down. They are not denied to build temples, whereas
mm,
churches are not allowed to be built in India. And there are a lot of persecution in Christian communities is facing. And of course, there are all the stories concerning dargahs and masjids and all of that about it.
yeah.
So it's a wrong example to pick, So uh, while expressing concerns for the
Yeah.
minority rights violations that's taking place in Pakistan and Bangladesh,
Mm,
the solution is not to harass or do worse to Indian Muslims. The solution
yeah.
is that to force the Bangladesh and the Pakistan government to look after their
Mm,
minorities well. And there are many, in a civilized societies, there are many platforms. And when it comes down to Bangladesh, the present person in charge, Mr. Yunus, has assured, and he has apologized, and their advisors have apologized. And I have seen no interviews of many Hindu groups also, things. But the question is this: so that argument does not work very much
yeah.
about it, right?
Okay, Professor Rahman, one of the things that I think one of the lenses through which you analyze the Muslim problem in India is, while you agree that initially somewhere in the beginning of the book that it's not perhaps too close to, perhaps it's too far fetched to compare the situation of Muslims with the African American experience, but but there are close sort of events in the past, I think, in particularly in this last 10 years, that bring us to a point where those comparisons seem inevitable, and not just that, but also the comparisons with Rohingyas in Burma, and Hindus and Sikhs and Christians and other minorities as Ahmadiyas in Pakistan we were just talking about, and Bangladesh, and then you would also talk about your views in China. And would you say that this is a lens that holds water, that it's not really far fetched?
Yeah, so as a scholar, I was trying to ask this question that if things go wrong with Muslims the way it is going wrong, if it begins to aggravate and it suffering goes up, so what kind of suffering that we could speculate for future? What would be the political situation of if they are denied of rights? So ever since the rise of BJP, so there are many scholars who have compared Indian situation or rise of BJP with the rise of Nazi Germany, with the fascism and all of that about of it. So there are a lot of scholarship on that particular front. So I try to take a rather broader sweep. I say that, what are the instances where what the majority community has done to minorities communities? Of course, right in our neighborhood, we see the cases in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, and all of that about it. In Sri Lanka also, there is this Tamilian case, where Tamilian minorities have suffered and which led to the secessionistic movement and then the crushing of it. So I try to throw a wider net, and one of the worst case, of course, most painful case that comes out is the African American story, and there we come across a couple of similarities. For instance, as I mentioned about of it, particularly when you have lynching, which is increasingly happening in India, or questions of segregations and boycott and all of that, or questions of two different laws. Muslims are facing violence and suspected. The number of inmates in an American prison of African Americans is very high. Likewise, the number of inmates of Muslim community in Indian prison is much bigger than their population share. In many states, that was found out at the time of the framing of such a report. So there are a lot of broad similarities that one could see about it. So what could happen to Indian Muslims could be a mix of all of that. One can't exactly say this is going to be there will be concentration camp and all of that about it. But some would like to uh, compare. Well, there is all these camps that are coming up in Assam and elsewhere where people have been denied of citizenship and they have been thrown into the people who are leading normal life of whatever kind, whether they're rickshaw puller or agricultural farmer or they're running some small business, but they were suddenly being picked up and told that you don't have documents, so you don't belong here. So they throw them in a camp. So that
Right.
camp may not be exactly like concentration camp, but you see, so there is an attempt to treat these people very differently, which is not acceptable in a modern civilized society, not in a
Right.
society which has fought against colonialism for so long with such force and with such success, telling the world that we would maintain a very high standard of human
Hmm.
value and human treatment, and that is not what we are doing. And
Right.
so there are possibilities of different kinds.
Hmm.
But my own sense is this, that if the Muslim suffering goes on the way it is going on, it will be a mix of all of that. But you will come across lynching, which you can compare with African Americans. You will come across economic boycott, which you can compare with African Americans. You can also come across various kinds of persecution, where you can compare with Rohingyas and all of that about it. Yeah.
Right. uh, One of the questions related to the caste element which we were just discussing, and another aspect to it, that you write somewhere that that uh, the semblance of secularism that India has enjoyed until this moment has been possible largely because of the perhaps the generosity of the upper caste, or maybe a certain sort of understanding of the upper caste. And you say, and that brings me to the caste calculations that play out in elections, particularly. And India continues to be a democratic, electoral democracy. So that remains relevant to the story of India. That in the recent elections, for instance, when the Lok Sabha elections and the results were out, and we were hailing, or the PDA formula of Akhilesh Yadav, the Pichhada Dalit and Alpasankyak, the backward Dalit and minorities formula of him. And you say that this any suggestions that any alliance between Muslim minorities and Dalits is not going to be is not going to last long. That might not work in the longer run. How do you look at it?
So Hindu majoritarianism has got this very specific ideological project, and they are not sigh about it. They're very clear about it. So there are interviews where, for instance, Mr. Mohan Bhagat has said that we will wait for another 20, 30 years for the project to take place and all of that. And a lot of secular political parties, however, and there are many people who suspect that most Indian voters who vote for BJP, they believe in Hindu Rashtra project, and which is not true. And that is one of the reasons why some of the secular political parties started adopting what is called the soft Hindutva approach to deal with
Yeah.
electorally to these things about it. In my analysis, most voters do not vote for BJP because they believe in Hindu Rashtra. There are many reasons why they are disenchanted with the existing regime. For instance, in Odisha, BJP has swept this time, and it's not because of the Hindu Rashtra, because Ram Mandir had virtually no impact on Odisha voters for many, many years about it. So I don't buy that particular argument, and that has become quite clear in the 2024 election. Specific constituency-wise results, either in Banaras or in Ajodhya, or the general result that we saw in Uttar Pradesh, clearly does not support that particular theory. So, what does it tell us? And the other thing is this: it is a fact that BJP is defeatable. Even Narendra Modi-led BJP is defeatable. If they could not defeat BJP in Gujarat, that is because that there was not enough serious campaign that was undertaken either by Congress party, or there was no real opposition to BJP at that point of time. But in other states, whether it is Karnataka or in Delhi, in the height of 2014's wave, a few months after the 2014 election in Delhi, BJP lost badly. The same kind of campaign that Mr. Modi led in the national election, he led the same campaign in the state election, and it did not work. And we have plenty of examples, whether it is Bengal, whether it is Karnataka, whether it is Himachal Pradesh. We have plenty of instances in last 10 years which come across that BJP is defeatable. So therefore, there is no such sway that this is a Hindu party and let us all get united and vote for it and all of that about of it. That does work for a certain section of population, but not about of it. Now, going back to the caste, my position is this, my understanding is this: historically, Hindu society has always been governed by the dominant castes, and they hold the real power. Even Britishers and Muslim rulers, when they ruled in alliance with the support of the upper castes of India. The British civil service system, which was open to Indians, who were these Indians who served British civil service system? Largely in this upper caste, because how many Dalits were educated at that point? Virtually none, right? The affirmative action comes much, much later. It is only in independent India when it comes down to about it. So today, however, what we come across is this: a large chunk of upper caste, for a variety of reasons, have developed sympathy and support for BJP, and there are many domestic as well as global reasons for it. Not necessarily mean that they have become communal, but they have become supporter of this. So when you have a general discussion, even opposition political parties would say that, look at it, the entire media as is supporting BJP, and what can we do? But when you talk about media, the journalists, what are the caste background of Indian media? It's largely upper caste, right? So you say that, oh, look at the diaspora. Diaspora is supporting BJP. Now the question is, what is the caste background of the diaspora? The caste background of the diaspora is again upper caste. How many Dalits go abroad and have their associations? And so all these people who throng and join and in big cities, whether it is Washington or London or in Australia or elsewhere about it, they largely come from the dominant caste groups. They are the ones who go abroad and they have got the educations and they seek out opportunities and they try to build up a better life elsewhere about it. So this shift has happened because there was a considerable disenchantment with the poor governance and the campaign against the governance of the Congress and other political parties. My argument, which I made in my earlier book of Rise of Saffron Power, more powerfully, which is about this, is this: that if it is a fact that Congress has ruled India for many, many years and people were unhappy with it for whatever reason about it. And it is natural to be unhappy with a political party after 30, 40, 50 years because different generations of people have taken over and all of that about it. Now, Indian voters gave an alternative in 1977. Indian voters gave an alternative, embraced an alternative in 1989. None of these alternatives emerged as an enduring political formation. Had these forces being formed as or emerged as enduring political formation, BJP, in my analysis, would have remained a regional political party. And BJP has emerged with the collaboration of lot of these so-called secular political parties, whether it is Nitish Kumar, whether it is Mamata Banerjee, whether it is Farooq Abdullah, all these people who are today condemning Narendra Modi as fascist and undemocratic and authoritarian, they were part of these regimes,
Absolutely.
right? So,
Yeah.
so BJP did not grow on its own. It
Yeah.
got a lot of goodwill and support from the so-called secular political parties who are finding themselves at the receiving end today because their parties are either falling off or getting fragmented or getting their governments are stolen and all of that about isn't happening about. They did not foresee this. They thought they're trying to civilize BJP. That is not happening about it.
Mm, mm.
So then, of course, the 9/11 played a very important role that generated a global Islamophobia, and a large
Right.
number of Indian upper castes who live abroad also became quite indifferent to the minority question or the Muslim question more specifically.
Right.
So my analysis is this: a lot of these upper caste Indians who support BJP, they are not necessarily communal people. Some of them may be swayed by RSS agenda and all of that, but most of them are not. But they are not particularly excited to be assertive for Muslim issues or minority issues either. They are just
Yeah.
indifferent because a large number of people are generally indifferent when it comes down to ideological positions. Matter of it,
And
they
it
would say,
also
"Oh, we
applies
are
to
very
the
happy."
secular parties today. It also applies to the secular parties today that are sort of very ambivalent when it comes to the Muslim question.
That's because that they don't have, because one of the biggest beneficiary of Muslim voting behavior, because my own
Mhm.
understanding is large number of Muslims, when they go to elections, as it happened in the Delhi election last time, or as it happened in West Bengal, as it happened in Karnataka, most Muslim voters are voting for a candidate or a political party which could defeat BJP.
Yeah.
So the biggest beneficiary, for instance, they voted for Congress in Karnataka. Here in Delhi, they voted for AAP party. In Bengal, they voted for TMC. So that is how they are behaving, or they voted for Samajwadi Party in Uttar Pradesh. About it.
Okay.
So they are just playing. They are doing their own calculations and looking at it because they realize that BJP has emerged. Has been quite aggressive in terms of denying them the opportunities that they deserve, and
Right.
so therefore they are quite doing this about it. The Congress is one of the biggest beneficiary of it. And
Right.
without
So,
Muslim support, Congress would not have got so many votes about it. But you don't come across Congress taking a very firm position with respect to Muslims in many instances. For instance, it was promised that Bajrang Dal, which is not a force, the real force is RSS, but
mm,
still, Bajrang Dal was supposed to be banned in Karnataka. We don't see anything happening in Karnataka, for instance. So there
right.
are plenty of examples I can give that this secular political parties, somehow or other, as I said, secular political parties somehow or other are swayed by this idea that Indian
Mm,
voters have become Hinduized and there is a Hindu consciousness and all of that. I don't think so. I think any political party which can which can launch a serious campaign based on a good understanding and can take a firm stand with respect to Muslims and all of that can easily do well. Can easily defeat BJP because there is no such set called Hindu consciousness on all of that about it.
mm,
There was a general understanding that after Ram Mandir, BJP would sweep Uttar Pradesh because they have built Ram Mandir. That did not happen. We saw that about it. Quite frankly, the campaign by Samajwadi Party was not that Herculean or that big. Because Akhilesh
so
Yadav is
no-
not a campaigner like Mamata Banerjee. Mamata Banerjee is a far more aggressive campaigner
right.
as opposed to Akhilesh Yadav is much more moderate campaigner about it. More old-fashioned routine kind campaign that he does. Even he's not a campaigner like Arvind Kejriwal, who is a far more fierce campaigner about it. So still, so BJP could not go very far. BJP had the worst performance since last 15 years or so. So there is a huge confusion among these new generations of leaders because
Mhm.
they are not grassroots politicians. So,
Right.
so, so they are basically fed by their advisors. They have their advisors in Delhi and Bombay and all of this. They're the big guys who give them advices in five-star hotels in some farmhouses here. And and there are all this. So they don't have a real understanding that how ordinary people live and what is the relationship of ordinary Muslim with an ordinary Hindu. It's very deep.
Yeah.
The social
So
fabric
this
of
reminds
Indian society is very, very deep. Yeah.
the election, since we're talking about the election, the results, and I wanted to understand from you that when the election, the results were out, a lot of us were celebrating and those secularists who were sort of really celebrating for the simple fact that the Narendra Modi government perhaps would lose its teeth, that it lose its muscle, and so far. Uh, Given the given the way it has been functioning, it doesn't really come across as that. I wanted to understand from you that this, you mentioned earlier in the interview about this ideological warfare, and you talk about in the book as well, and this is seeped into the policy level, and the problems actually grow manifold when it happens at the policy level, and this multi-pronged attack, and you're right that Hindutva's sole agenda seems to be a complete annihilation of Muslims, in a sense that, and all these issues that it keeps bringing up every now and then, the issue of masjid or Waqf land or dargah or hijab or whatever, is actually to de-Islamize, is a step towards de-Islamizing India in that sense. Would you
That's right.
say, this whole Waqf amendment bill also as a part of that? And would you say that, even after the fact that Narendra Modi or the BJP has not got absolute majority, it continues to be as sort of perhaps vicious as ever?
Well, first of all, yes, that is my formulation. What is unfolding in India is a de-Islamization project. Muslims no more, Islam no more. About of it. So that is what has been unfolding about of it, and that particular way of looking at it is very different from the minority rights violation. To draw the distinction, the differentiate the two. What happened, or the findings of such a report tells us, and whatever is recorded, as you know, that even before all of this, there are Muslims who are finding it hard to find accommodation in big cities. They used to face discrimination in accommodations and all of that about of it. So there are always all those issues. Those are minority rights violations. So the economic backwardness where somebody is denied because of his religion a job. So that is a minority right violation about of it. But what we are seeing is a far more comprehensive, well-developed strategy to kind of deny this community from all sides and all issues: what they eat, what they wear, what's their religious institution, the legality of all of that. And it is only the dargahs and masjids whose legality are raised. The legality of other religious institutions of other communities are not raised anywhere in any city about it. So dargah is part of that. I do look at dargah, the entire Waqf bill and all of that is part of it, because it is quite now debated both inside the parliament and outside the parliament, that the bill suggests that there would be Hindus who would be part of the Waqf review committee and all of that, which is not the case. There are no Muslims who are looking after Hindu trusts or Hindu temples and all of that, or Christians who are looking after or churches and all of that about of it. So this is little taking things a bit too far about it. So there is a de-Islamization project. Now the question is this: given that this is a coalition government, are they running it with the same commitment, or have they become a little careful? I would say that they are running with the same commitment, because BJP is a big force in politics today, and it has expanded. It has made a significant inroad even in South. It is not in a position to form government in many states, say in Tamil Nadu or Kerala, but it has its social base has gone through a significant shift, and it has
Right.
recently swept Odisha, for instance. So it is going to be a pan-Indian political party. Electoral defeat is not an ideological defeat, that they know it very well about it.
Mm.
Now, given that the opposition is so divided, given that resistance to them ideologically is also so limited,
Mm.
they are quite hopeful. They're ideologically, they could be able to undertake their project quite successfully. So
Right.
I don't think that they are demoralized, or they are going to put everything in back burner and will start everything anew, listening to take the advice
Right.
of Nitish Kumar and Naidu every day on everything
Mm.
about of it. On the top of it, Nitish Kumar and Naidu, both of them have been long-time partners of BJP.
Mm.
It
Mm.
is not that the BJP is not new to them. Now, I just wanted to conclude by specifically mentioning one thing. If Nitish Kumar and Chandrababu Naidu are so committed to India's secular project, are so committed to the minority issues, then
mm,
why cannot say tell Mr. Modi that have an inclusive cabinet, have few Muslims in the cabinet. If you
mm.
don't take them, then we are not going to be part of it. They can do this much.
Right,
You see, so they're not doing that. So that tells you that their position with respect to minority issues are also quite problematic, and it's more superficial. It is not that substantive.
right.
They're not going to put their own agenda, own benefits and own agendas
Right.
or own
Mr.
benefits
Rahman,
at risk.
one of the things that you, sorry, I'm interrupting you. I'll just quickly wind up with two more questions. One of the things that you do and that's a very interesting chapter in a book, is the cultural and political lives of South Indian Muslims. And that is one aspect that remains not generally usually discussed when it comes to the minority question. And we tend to focus a lot on North Indian Muslims and tend to be a little bit, tend to ignore or not sort of bring to the fore the question about South Indian Muslims. And I wanted to ask you: do you see South Indian Muslims in a better position compared to those in North India, politically, culturally, and in so many other ways?
Well, as you rightly said in the beginning, that the book is written in the context of Hindu nationalism, Hindu majoritarianism. So
Right.
one of the question I asked is this: that BJP has been able to establish itself in various parts of India, including Kashmir or Northeast, of course, Central India and Western India, and all of that about of it, and they're
Mm,
trying their best to enter into Calcutta.
mm,
They have failed through electorally, but now there is a crisis, and that has given them opportunities to make a headway, and they're trying to generate enough noise over there in order to
mm,
create an opportunity for themselves. So South is something since the days of Ajodhya movement. A lot of scholars they wrote about it that BJP cannot really expand to South because this is agenda that has an appeal only in North India, and India is inherently a diverse country. They are
mm,
structurally diverse country, and that diversity cannot BJP cannot find ways to overcome that. So therefore, BJP can never become a national political party. But that
mm,
particular thesis has been proved wrong with BJP emerging in Karnataka as a ruling political party,
right.
right? And is a major force. Even if they are out of power, they are a major force. They are the most prominent opposition
Political
political
party.
parties over there. And
Mm,
the other junior party of this Deve Gowda is also a partner with them nowadays. So that's where they are. So they have entered South and they have made some inroad into South, but the South's history and politics is very different. For
mm,
instance, Islam in South largely emerged because of Sufi traditions through its trade interactions with the Middle East. The interaction was very different about it. But somehow or other, there is a new history that is being planted of invasion and violence in various parts of South. There is an attempt to saffronize the entire politics and to replicate all of that. Now, there is a resistance also coming from the South. From the South also has a very distinctive brand of politics, a politics
yeah.
which has a rich
Very
legacy of
inclusive.
Periyar, yeah,
Mm,
Periyar and all of that. So the
yeah.
future of that competition eventually depends how the southern political parties manage to defend the legacy of Periyar against the theory of Savarkar. So
Yeah.
it's a class of Savarkar and Periyar that would eventually come up over there, and we will see where it's all heading. Part of it. But
Mm,
what is important also to take note of is this: BJP did not stick to one agenda. BJP has multiple strategies in different places. Its strategy in Kashmir was very different, as opposed to its strategy in Karnataka, as opposed to strategy in, for instance, in Orissa. In
right.
Orissa, there is a Jagannath cult.
Mm,
So Odias basically believe in Jagannath cult. So there is a tremendous appeal of Jagannath cult. So it's not
mm,
Ram Janmabhoomi. So they deployed heavily Jagannath cult this time.
mm, mm,
In the all the campaigns that I watched, the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, and Mr. Nada, they went and they all started with Jai Jagannath and ended with Jai Jagannath. Then they said Jai Sri Ram. It is not
mm.
only Jai Sri Ram, which is generally the case in Uttar Pradesh, for instance. So
Yeah, yeah.
BJP is also very cleverly trying to use multiple strategies in different places to win over. Let's be
Right,
very clear: the hunger of BJP to expand its ideological project is much more greater. Their
right.
commitment to this is much more greater as
Mm,
opposed to the secularist commitment to defend secularism.
Right.
Therefore, in my book, in Rise of Saffron Power, I said the resistance that we saw against BJP in
Hmm.
1996, in which a far more moderate and ac- acceptable leader like Bajpayee was denied a government after 13 days, we are not going to see that kind of resistance. Because the new
Right.
generations of dynasts who are leading this secular struggle, whether it is Rahul Gandhi or Akhilesh Yadav or Lalu's son or all of them about of it, they don't have that grander understanding of India.
Hmm. Hmm.
So something that was
Okay.
there with Biju Patnaik or Somnath Chatterjee or Mulayam Yadav
Right.
of that time and all of that. So their commitment and resistance was very different, driven by a very different kind of an understanding than the
Right.
present generations of it. So there is a qualitative difference in the resistance, and
Right.
which is what makes BJP success little more BJP's
Hmm.
possibility of success is a little higher, and therefore the suffering of Muslim conditions or Muslim
Right.
situations a little problematic and disappointing and
Right.
challenging.
If
Yeah.
it hates if it really hates Muslims, how would you look at its overtures towards Pasmanda Muslims, for instance? I mean, in recent months and years, we have seen from the Prime Minister himself, launching this outreach program to Pasmanda Muslims. How do you look at that aspect? And we have two more questions, and we'll quickly wind up.
Yeah, well, I don't think that there has been any significant policy-oriented outreach towards Pasmandas. There were
Hmm.
statements in this regard, but there was nothing significant that's been done with respect to Pasmandas. Because Pasmandas, as I say in my book, is a very, very loose term. One
Hmm.
does not have a clear understanding what it really means. One can
Yeah.
broadly say Pasmandas are the people who are coming out of Hindu heritage. Then a vast number of Indian Muslims have come out of Hindu heritage. And this is nothing very new because Islam, relatively a younger Abrahamic religion, a vast number of Muslims all over the world came from some other religion. They were Jews or Christians or tribals or something else elsewhere about it, or Buddhists in China, and they embraced Islam. And that is how the story of evolution of Islam all over the world about it. So our all Muslims ancestors were somebody else, about whether they
Hmm.
were Brahmins or Rajputs or lower caste. That's a different story about it, because everybody did not leave behind a record saying that under what situations, under what conditions they have embraced religion about it. But
Hmm.
historians have not been able to resolve that particular puzzle of Islamization, how it has happened. There has been a lot of speculations. Some of the speculations, for instance, Richard Eaton has this very powerful book about how Muslims became Islam spread in Bengal. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of empirical work, but there is no general theory where one could say and describe this number of people because of this reason became Muslim and they became Sikh or Sayyid and Pathan and all of that about of it. So we
Yeah.
have this huge ambiguity that is there about of it. But let us, for sake of conversation, let us agree with the fact that vast number of Indian Muslims happen to be Pasmandas and they come from Hindu heritage. For instance, I come from a Muslim heritage, but genetically, how do I look like? I don't look like an Arab. I don't look like
Hmm.
a Chinese. I don't look like an Iranian. I don't look like these things about Turkish. So
Right.
genetically, I'm a very much a South Asian. So that
Hmm.
is the biggest evidence. So it is possible my ancestors were Hindus. So far as the Pasmanda thing is concerned, first of all, it is really surprising. Prime Minister Narendra Modi in recent years has number of times given stories about his association of Muslim families when he was growing up in the
Hmm.
neighborhood where he grew up and all of that about it. He served. He had a spectacular career as a chief minister of Gujarat, but he never raised the Pasmanda question at that point of time. He did not figure out Pasmanda. For the first time, to the best of my knowledge, he mentioned about Pasmandas to an interview to Smita Prakash during Uttar Pradesh election. And then he gave a detailed lecture on this, probably somewhere in Bhopal. And it was in the national convention in July 2022 in Hyderabad, in the BJP's national meeting. That's where he said that there would be an effort to have an outreach towards Pasmanda communities, right? Now the
Yeah.
question is this: there was a golden opportunities, and then there was Karnataka election. We did not see anything Pasmandas, and now
Hmm.
there was a national election that had happened. We didn't see a single Pasmanda Muslim candidate was fielded anywhere. You
Because
have
on hormones,
303
you would say
candidates.
there's no substance to it.
Yeah, so the question is this, there are so many state governments where BJP has got government, whether it is Madhya Pradesh or Gujarat or Rajasthan. How many Pasmanda Muslims are appointed as this thing about of it? And BJP has got quite a few, half a dozen Muslim spokesperson who are very fierce and active. We see
Right.
them every day on television about of it. I'm sure that they could be accommodated, even if they are not going to champion minority rights. They're basically, in my view, are agents of Hindutva. They speak the Hindutva language, and that's how I describe them. So the point I wanted to make is this: there is no substantive overture that we have come across in any of the areas, either with respect to policies or with respect to political representation or with respect to general attempt to reach out to them. I haven't seen anything significant intervention made by BJP either in the state level government or in the national government. A lot could have been done about it.
Mm.
So I still look at it, that's more a rhetoric. That's more a rhetoric because there are a lot of concerns by the Western countries regarding the Muslim situation. I think that's
Right.
one way they're trying to deflect and these things about they're trying to deflect and trying to address it. Well, there are this pasmandas about of it. And the other
Right.
is also to kind of generate an impression among Muslim that if you are backward because there are all these asrafs who took away all the privileges from you, benefits from you,
Mm.
it is your own
Mm.
internal problem. So that is also probably another reason. So Pasmanda, by highlighting Pasmanda rhetorically,
Mm.
it serves primarily two purposes: to deflect Western criticism to some extent and to tell Muslims that you yourself are responsible. And that's a very Brahminical argument, just as they said to Dalits for centuries that, your conditions are purely because of yourself a part of it. But the state has a
True.
responsibility to address that, to create
Yeah.
conditions for that and all of that. But,
Professor Rahman,
so,
two quick questions, and I'll need your quick answers to that. And that is one, the operative word in your book, the title of the book, is the political. You're not talking about the general future of Muslims, but you're talking about the political future of Indian Muslims. And you describe somewhere that political is the key word. Why? Because if you have political power, the economic and the cultural elements come to it. It's become the essential corollaries in that sense. So would you say that for Indian Muslims to have any kind of legitimacy in the country, they need political power?
yes, that's the point, actually. As I said, that the Muslim issues have been part of discussions in this country for a very long time.
Mm.
So, since the publication of such a report in 2006, there were a lot of discussions on Muslim issues, right? But it was all
Mm.
about their socio-economic conditions. And prior to that, there were discussions concerning Urdu language, concerning triple talaq, concerning situations of Muslim women, and all of that about it, Islam and women, and all of that about it. So there has always been discussions with this about
Mm.
it. But they were all part of what I call the general future, but not political future. So it is very important those who try to understand the main argument that I'm trying to make, and which is where my take is different as opposed to other scholars who are writing on Indian Muslims, because other scholars who are writing on Indian Muslims are basically writing on the general future.
Yeah.
So my argument is this, and the question that I ask is this: well, there are all these discussions concerning socioeconomic backwardness, XYZ is going on about of it.
Mm.
So now we are in a situation where the political environment is very different.
Mm.
Now, what happens to these discussions in the new political environment? Is it going to continue in the same manner, or is there a difference? So I say, no, there is a difference. Because if in the new political environment, you are not treated as politically equal, then the state does not have the obligation to look at you or address your concerns. When you are equal, then you say, well, you have fallen behind. So then the state would say, okay, you have fallen behind, then let me do something for you.
Yeah.
So Muslim children are having high dropout because their parents can't afford to send them to schools. So let me have some scholarships for you. Or Muslim children are not able to get education because the neighborhood does not have schools. So let me set up some schools for you. Or Muslims are not getting loans because of their discrimination. So let me come out and design a financial policy to financial sector where I can give you some listings about it.
None of those
So
things are going to happen anytime soon. You would
the,
say.
the question is this: if you're not politically equal in a
Mm.
majoritarian society, so these things are all insignificant because it does not matter how you live, how you die, what happens to you, and all of that about it. So
So,
this
what
is
choice
something
would you
that
say the Muslims have in India today? Where, I mean, you would say that, would you say that they have failed, they have been failed by their elite and the political leadership that they have? In fact, the political leadership, when it comes to that, it's been none whatsoever. So, what choice do Indian Muslims have? Where do they go from here?
Well, we live at a time, there are two things that's very clear about it. One is that India is a democracy. It is possible there will be some distortions in the democracy in terms of fairness of elections and this and that. But I don't think the democratic system of India is going to collapse anytime soon. So we will remain a democratic societies, right? So that part is quite clear. The second is this, that since the society would remain democratic, so there would be discussions concerning rights of people. People will have rights about it. So therefore, uh, Muslims should be aware that they have rights and they have to ask for those rights about it. So now, how to make that rights or their rights a successful project and negotiate in the vegetarian community. That's where the Muslim community have to, I am against this idea of Muslim community fighting for themselves.
Hmm.
So my argument is that the best way that Muslims, because even if it is a historical identity, it is still a minority identity in the context of present India. So, as a minority, it has got some rights, but as a minority, its rights could be best secured only when India is a secular democracy, where you are judged based on your ability and your rights, not based on your religion. So then, you are not going to be treated badly because you're a Muslim, or somebody is not going to be treated better because he happens to be a Hindu, because you are all equal in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the constitution about of it. So now the question is this: how to restore secular polity in the face of these challenges. And for that, of course, there is a need for a political struggle. That political struggle does not have to be simply electoral. What is going on in India, the resistance to majoritarianism, is largely electoral. People think, oh, BJP has lost, so secularism has won. You know, so that's not the case about it. So there is another way. There are non-electoral ways that this fight has to go on, but I don't think any political party is taking that fight very seriously about of it, which is very very important. So Muslims have to develop partnership with other communities and other social classes, including upper caste of India, given that they have so much of power, given that they enjoy so much of influence. And also, my understanding is this: all of them are not supporting BJP, but they believe in this Hindutva agenda. And many of them in various parts of the world do know that there is something called multiculturalism and all of that. They are the biggest beneficiary of Western multiculturalism, Western diversity project. The biggest beneficiary of Western diversity project, whether in America or in Australia or in Canada or in Europe or in Britain, happen to be the upper caste Indian Hindus. They have been accommodated, given jobs in places because Western society wants to be diverse about of it. So it is very important. Those who have been the beneficiaries, they are unfortunately siding with a majoritarian project. Instead of siding with a majoritarian project, they should. But there are some of them who are. For instance, there is a group called Hindu for Democratic Rights or something like that. So there are various groups who are operating in various parts of Europe and states and all of that. I think that all Indians all over the world need to come together to fight for it. And it's only through that then other minorities such as Sikh communities, such as Christians, and they are quite supportive of this, and the South, the entire Periyar legacy and all of that. So if all these forces can come together, the whole problem is this, that they are there, but they are not together. The fight is not that well coordinated. If that is a well coordinated fight, I am quite sure that the majoritarianism of India would begin to retreat. But it will take several years for that retreat to happen. It is not going to happen in next election and all of that about it. So,
On
so
that
my
note,
own, yeah. So I'm quite hopeful that eventually, when we may go through a bad phase, there will be a lot of violence and a lot of suffering. But eventually, I'm hopeful that there will be some enlightenment and humanity. As Martin Luther King would often say, the arc of
yeah,
humanity would eventually bend towards justice. And I think that justice would happen to
I
Muslims
hope that
also.
happens in the area. On that hopeful note, Professor Aman, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you.